I was in my local game shop about a week ago, and I was looking about in a section where they sell old consoles along with a few old games and stuff, and I spotted two old N64 games, one of which I used to play a lot when I was younger, and one that I'd always read about in magazines but never really had a go at. And these were Doom 64 and Quake 2. Now, I've been looking around YouTube, and as many of the reviews are on the site, I'm going to say it, they're a bit naff. Whether it's someone reading from a Wikipedia sheet or some hand camera recording sort of stuck in the middle of the screen. So, with my capture card out, I'm going to give everyone my own personal view on what I think was one of the most underrated games of the N64. Now, first and foremost, I need to point out that this game wasn't made by ID Software. This version was made by Midway, and considering this was Midway's first attempt at a Doom game so late on in the franchise, I'm very impressed. I'm playing this on the Iron Doom difficulty mainly because it's been a good 10 years since I've probably sat down and given this game a good old playthrough. Also for the simple fact of because I can, but back to the game. There hasn't really been much of a change in formula. Still the same as any Doom, well the old ones anyway, which have a gun in the centre of the screen and you fire at an enemy, all you need to do is sort of move your screen in the general direction and fire, the game sort of does the rest. I personally think it's a much better method of FPS on the Nintendo 64, mainly because, even 10 years ago, I don't get on with the stick on the controller. Doesn't seem to agree with me too much. The game itself is pretty substandard. You start on a stage, solve a few locked doors, finding a few keys, you shoot through a large amount of enemies, find the exit and receive a score, followed by a password and an opportunity to save your progress if you have a memory card plugged in. Like other Dooms, if you beat a certain level in the game, it shows you a little piece of story telling you how awesome you are, and it moves on. Now, there's a few little features though, like the amount of traps in the game it sets for you, which there's a lot more compared to old Dooms, which can annoy the hell out of you, especially when you're just about to finish a stage and you get crushed by the ceiling, you're forced to redo the whole level again, due to there being no checkpoints. I actually personally prefer it like that, mainly because Doom games haven't exactly been known for their easy difficulty. Then again, speaking of difficulty, I think Midway really decided to up the ante. Even the first few stages are a lot more difficult than most games' harder stages. You find harder enemies a lot earlier on, like finding a Baron of Hell as early as level 6. But while we're on the topic of enemies, there isn't much new enemies to face. The older ones have been tired up a bit to match the game's dark and gritty look, but the newer enemies you face are the Pain Elemental and the Nightmare Imp. Neither of which give you too much of a headache, but they're definitely worth mentioning. But I will say that the final boss, I'm not going to give too much away, is easily the most difficult final boss I've ever seen, next to Mizar from Jet Force Gemini. Now, something I have to mention though is what separates this Doom from the other Dooms. While the older Dooms focus mainly on an arcade style of shoot loads of enemies along with mock music in the background, this Doom has gone for a much more survival horror theme. The levels are darker and spookier, and the sound effects are a lot more eerie, and the brightness is a lot lower. Now, many people still complain about this, but there is an option to up your brightness in the options menu. My TV can go as bright as the sun, so needless to say I don't have much trouble with vision. But when it comes to music and audio, Doom 64 doesn't really have music, instead it has more of a sequence of noises, which are a lot more effective in making the player feel uncomfortable. Then again, this is what I've always thought about horror games, which is the developers have to create the right atmosphere to scare the player, and I think Midway certainly knew what they were doing there. Now, just to demonstrate what I'm talking about, here's a few comparisons between the music from earlier Dooms with the music of Doom 64. Let's check it out. The game itself looks very nice. I was a little taken back to see a sprite game on an N64, but after giving it a good long playthrough, I can't imagine it looking as good if it was like Quake on the N64. The sprites themselves are very clean, and a lot scarier than the Dooms out there. That isn't saying that they're breathtaking. There are only a few frames of animation on each enemy. Most death animations are only about sort of 5 frames long. This wouldn't look so bad if the animations were sped up slightly to compensate that, but I guess that would have taken a lot of the smoothness out. Now in total, Doom 64 is definitely a game any Doom fan should try out. It's definitely a lot spookier than the rest, and if I can have a small complaint, it's that your option settings can't be saved, which started to annoy the crap out of me as my cartridge kept freezing near the end. But it only takes about 5 seconds to sort out, so thank you very much for watching the review. I will put up a few more if I feel like it.